Welcome to the Culture Lab. I'm your host, Aga Bayer. This podcast helps you turn your company culture into rocket fuel for meaningful growth. It explores how we can make the word work synonymous with fun, meaning, and belonging. It looks at how we can build remarkable cultures that scale as our businesses grow and the world keeps on changing.
A lot of founders, a lot of CEOs, or even a lot of companies are talking about a strong culture. So what if that culture is not beneficial or if that culture is maybe outgrown itself, or if that culture is a bit, dysfunctional? Then it's not a good thing per se to have a strong culture, right? Yeah. But to have the right culture means also that you have realized that the culture needs to evolve, and the culture it's people. And when people leave and new people join, and also when your people grow and develop, it has to change.
Hello, and welcome to episode 73 of the Culture Lab podcast. This episode is brought to you by CultureBrained, a one-of-a-kind global community for leaders who want to learn new ways of cultivating remarkable cultures at scale, especially now in this brave new world of remote and hybrid work. The CultureBrained Community is where we come together to answer some pretty darn hard, ungoogleable questions about culture. And it's where we work together on our shared mission to make work synonymous with fun, meaning, and belonging. And if this sounds like something you'd like to be a part of, check it out at culturebrained.com. There's a link in the show notes. And now, let me introduce you to my guest today. So this time, I will talk to Katarina Berg, the Chief Human Resources Officer at Spotify. Katarina is really a powerhouse to reckon with, and I think she's the embodiment of a culture-brained executive. And by the way, I think every startup, every scale-up, and every corporate giant desperately needs one. And in this episode, you'll hear Katarina share a lot of intimate details about her journey, from growing up in a very unconventional way on a ship on the seven seas and being exposed to a huge amount of diversity during that time, being a heavily dyslexic kid who actually thrived at school because she was simply never told that she had a problem, and eventually falling into an HR career, and then falling in love with it. And today, Katarina is a senior leader at one of the most well-known and beloved companies out there. And she's going to divulge a little bit about how she and other leaders in the company make Spotify's culture so special. Here is Katarina Berg.
It's my pleasure to be here. And who am I? Big question, right? I'm the CHRO at Spotify. That is what I do for a living. I hope I'm more interested than that. I'm half Japanese, half Swedish. Grew up on the seven seas because my father is a sea captain. I love being a behaviorist because that is what I am. And I enjoy my work still, and HR was my first passion, still is my passion.
Oh, I love that. That's already so much that I would like to dig deeper into. And before we talk about this incredibly exciting but also daunting art of scaling a business and its culture that you know so much about, being the CHRO of Spotify, I actually want to continue on this thread of personal information. And I want to continue on a personal note. Can you tell us a little bit about the early cultural influences that shaped you as a person?
Yeah, I would be glad to. I think actually what I said growing up on the seven seas, being on a big ship, being a very small girl, having parents from two different cultures, I think my dad and obviously my mom too took me to places where I really got to appreciate different types of culture, different types of of really cool historical places. I saw a lot of things that are maybe in so many ways considered to be the best things of life, but also a lot about struggles and hardships and people that were not as fortunate. And I think that shaped me a lot. And also, instead of saying, oh, well, I'm not 100% Swedish or I'm not 100% Japanese, obviously there is a couple of things that you have to mitigate then. But instead of having an outlook in life of, hey, I have both. So a lot of things that in my life is never either or, is both and.
So we've already mentioned being exposed to contrasts and diversity in different cultures that left an imprint on you. But I'm curious, how did you stumble upon this awesome professional path that you are on today? Who inspired you into taking this path?
In one way, I don't think anybody inspired me to go into behaviorism or do what we can do in Sweden, which is going to university and actually study HR management and org design and development. It was more of what, I said this yesterday to somebody that is not Swedish, so I direct translated, but it was more of a banana shield, actually. I stepped on something, I found kind of a brochure. I knew what topics in school I was interested in. I kind of had a vision of what I would see myself doing. And then by pure luck, I found this this field and applied. And then I went to university for 4 years. I got my master's in HR management. And then I started to work, and immediately both in university, but then also my first day at work, I was like, okay, this is it. I found my drive. I found, what I really have a passion for, and I never fell out of love.
So let's fast forward to today. And I think to say that we live in very interesting times would probably be an understatement of the century, because the amount and speed of change we're all facing is just staggering. And in that context, I heard you say in an interview that I listened to that when everything is up in the air, having the right culture is of paramount importance. So can you share your perspective around why you consider culture so important, but also what do you mean by the right culture?
Yeah. So I will try to do that. And I think it's a couple of buckets here. So why you could either think it's just semantics when I talk about right culture, but if you think a bit about it, a lot of people, a lot of founders, a lot of CEOs, or even a lot of companies are talking about a strong culture. So what if that culture is not beneficial or if that culture is maybe outgrown itself, or if that culture is a bit, dysfunctional, then it's not a good thing per se to have a strong culture, right? But to have the right culture means also that you have realized that the culture needs to evolve, and the culture it's people. And when people leave and new people join, and also when your people grow and develop, it has to change. And I think that's why it's good to remind yourself that you want to have the right culture. And when you add people to it, it's culture add-on rather than culture fit. And these are very, very important things, and they're totally different. So I think that is why I say it's better to have a right culture. When it comes to why culture is important, I think it's important even more so when we live in as you say, very, very strange and sometimes challenging times. I think it's always been important, but for different reasons. When we were not necessarily connected in the world and people didn't travel, it was important for some reasons, right? When we went into the connected and digital world, it was also important to have maybe a bit of analog culture. And now with the pandemic and a more distributed kind of work life and life, I think it's going to be even more so that you need to have those, attributes, those reminders, the things that you kind of go back to as known. Because I think everybody that is a human being also are, a creature of habit. So some things you just want to feel that you recognize, and it is a bit of the feeling of coming home. And when home is everywhere, both online or, if we talk about work life, if that is in a coffee shop or, in a lobby or in your home or in an office or any other place that I didn't mention now, then again, I think the sense of community might replace a bit of the sense of the way we've been using the word culture when we talk about work life. And then I think lastly, the last bucket why it's important is you have to define what culture is first before you can really discuss how you think about it, why you work or why you think it's important. But if you think about it as the pure heart and soul, but also the energy that is shared, but also developed in between human beings, and that experience that comes to light, then I think everybody would sign up and say it's important to work with your workplace culture as well as maybe other types of culture. And the bond and also love, I guess, but the bond for sure that is created between, or throughout meaningful human connections, and that connectivity and that social glue. I think that is super important. And I think that is more important than having, a job with a specific title or, a remit for a month, for a year or something like that. I think we all want to be part of something that is bigger than ourselves.
And I think these days it has become even more evident to us because after a year and a half of living in lockdown and then with COVID, a lot of us realize that other things are probably equally, if not more important than the office life. And so now we see this huge exodus and this huge wave of resignations because people are choosing what's really important for them. And I think what they are pursuing is exactly what you're talking about. So the sense of belonging, meaning, fulfillment, and joy, and perhaps even the sense that actually work can be synonymous with those words. It's possible. And people started searching for this. So I can absolutely see how a company that works in that direction has a huge competitive advantage as compared to others who haven't realized that. And, what I loved about what you said, and I want to double click on that, is this piece around habits and that sense of homecoming. I've never really thought about this, but now I'm realizing that a part of culture is exactly that it's something that you recognize, it's something that makes you feel comfortable. And at the same time, as you say, it has to be a place safe enough for you to be able to feel comfortable with evolving and growing and changing. So that makes me think about your manifesto. And it's probably one of the best, one of the, I think, most impressive manifestos, company manifestos that I have ever seen. And so I really wanted to ask you about this because I guess this gives you this anchor and that core and the essence of who you are and that sense of being at home. Can you tell us how you came up with it and how you use it to cultivate a culture that is the right culture for Spotify?
Yeah, so what we call the band manifesto is something that has been around for quite some time, but we'd never really communicated it externally. But we thought it could be helpful to do that because there's a lot of people that is knocking on our door and want to be part of the band, meaning that they are applying for jobs, on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. And how can we manage expectations in a way where we describe, what direction we are going, who we are, what our soul is, what values that are important to us, why we dare to be value driven, and what our beliefs are. And I think that is what the band manifesto is. And it has had like different kind of versions where we did 2013, I think, or 14, a passion tour where we collected everybody's input on what they think their values should be and what is important for them to be able to grow, but also do a good job, but also have fun at the same time, because all these things are very, very important to be able. And I think, to succeed, both as a company, but also as an individual, but for sure for the teams. And by giving everybody a voice and really being in dialogue with all the people that are Spotify, we wanted to do kind of a short version and put that into writing in a way that back to, okay, what describes our tribe? What does describe, what life at Spotify is? And that is the manifesto. So that is how it came to life. And this, I would say, this is the third or even the fourth version of it.
Mm-hmm. So it's evolving. It's evolving
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
I love that. And I also love that. And I wonder if it's because you are a Swedish company, you are a European company, this democratic, I would say, approach to creating it, because many other companies, starting from Netflix, it was pretty much a top-down approach.
Mm-hmm.
And you've actually as you said, engaged every single person almost in Spotify back then in 2013, 2014 to have their voice heard and their opinions heard and be able to co-create that culture and own it. And I love it. And this is the approach that I'm using as well when I'm helping companies to create their own, I call it a culture playbook, basically what your manifesto is. Another thing that I love about your manifesto is that you also have a manifesto for managers. So basically you are making it super clear what your expectations are from your managers. Do you want to talk about this a little bit? Why you've done that and why that has been so important for you?
Yeah, first of all, we really truly believe that our leadership or our managers are important. And we did the same thing with the leadership criteria that we did with the values for the company. We gave everybody a voice and said, what have you seen, what do you believe in, and what is important to succeed as a leader now and in the future. And that became kind of our manager SLA, like the service level agreement. This is how we recruit managers. This is how we dress or develop managers. This is also how we evaluate and sometimes deploy. Doesn't mean that it's up or out, or everybody's not really interested in being a manager, and not everybody is also equipped to be a manager. So you have to be courageous enough and you have to be willing to lead. And then there are these criteria that we are using to make sure that we kind of measure up to that promise and that agreement that we tell our people that this is the things that are important for us as a company, part of the contract of us between the company and the managers and our people. So the manager manifesto is part of the band manifesto, and again, it's just to clarify how we work with this and how we design our all our trainings and what is it built on.
Mm-hmm. And what I also found extremely interesting about how you approach this, just like your wider manifesto, it's a work in progress. And at some point you decided that you needed to simplify it. And I'm a huge believer in simplification, not dumbing things down, but making them user-friendly. Do you want to talk a little bit about thinking behind this, why it has been important for you to simplify it, and what impact did it have on how your managers are operating at work?
Right. So I think we all would like to make simple easy, but it's so easy to say, but so hard to do. And but if you are in a fast-paced environment and the competition is fierce, and you have great people, and everybody wants to develop, everybody wants to grow. You can't really have overly complicated processes. You can't have booklets, or you could not have too many policies or anything that will slow you down or get people demotivated. You just want to have more or less like a mental paddock, right? Something that is a guardrail that everybody will understand, that everybody could commit to, and that everybody could, more or less align to. So again, to make it as simple, as short, but again, also not make it into something that you would do as a payoff or something that sounds good or as a part of a campaign, or it sounds like it was an external kind of agency that put this together and it sounds super smart. It also has to have a soul. It has to be part of who you are. People need to recognize the tone of voice, the tonality, and they need to know that it's real and also authentic. Again, it doesn't mean that our managers are perfect and we are looking for like Übermensch. That is not what it is. We're looking for real people that do mistakes, and they are also on a journey, and they are not perfect. But it is a profession to be a manager. You sign up to a couple of things when you are a manager that you don't sign up to if you are a specialist or if you are an individual contributor. And we want to make that as clear as possible, again, to manage expectations, but also there are a couple of things that when you sign up or you agree to be a manager, that you need to constantly also work on your development and your management skills, because you're such a big part of the environment for all your employees, that you could, be part of the success, but you could also be part of maybe dragging the whole team down. So these are the things that are important, and the easier, the simpler, the crisper, the clearer the message is, the better it has proven to work for us.
I agree 100%. Actually, I often say that you only need to master 2 skills to cultivate a thriving culture at scale. The first one is creating clarity, which is exactly what you were talking about. And the second one is enabling congruence, which is a fancy word basically for enabling people to be able to walk the talk. So actually bring those things to life. And as you say, no one is perfect, but I think our job is to make it easy for people to do what is written in those manifestos or those culture playbooks, which is going to be my next question. How do you deal with that piece? So how do you enable congruence? How do you help your managers and your employees to really bring those beliefs and those values to life?
Through 2 things that are quite the same thing, actually. It's openness and transparency. We believe in having all information for all our people and not making any difference. And here it starts at the top. And our founder and our CEO, Daniel, I think he masters this in such a good way, and he's role modeling it too. So there's not one dashboard. There is not one single, document that it's not there for anybody, no matter what role you have, it doesn't matter what pocket in the world you sit in. It doesn't matter if you're young or old, if you've been with us for a long time or not, if you direct report to him or if you have a totally different type of role. People are more or less the same, meaning there are a couple of universal drivers, right? Autonomy is one, competence development is another, belonging is the third, and benevolence is the fourth. And if you put that together with openness and transparency, meaning that very old picture that is holding true still, you either tell people that they should, help you carve out a piece of stone, or you tell them that they are a very, very important part of building a cathedral. And at least when you have that picture, I think you also have your purpose. And you can't talk enough about purpose. And here, I think sometimes a couple of organizations sometimes get it wrong with the easy part of thinking that in their pyramid, in their hierarchical, it's only people at the top that is interested in the bigger picture. I think everybody is interested in the bigger picture, and everybody needs purpose. So you have to be very open and transparent now. Where are you going? Why are you going? What is your why? What is the problem you're trying to solve for? And what is the plan and strategy? And if you can involve people, great. And people don't necessarily, as I usually say, they don't have to like your decision, but they need to understand it. So it's the 3 C's, right? If you say that communication is everything, it is to be clear, it is to be consistent, and it is to be compelling. So storytelling and communication skills is going to be even more so important to all managers going into the future, especially if you have people scattered all around the world.
Yeah. Which is definitely something that I want us to talk about as well. But before we go there, I don't want to lose this thread, because you talked about the importance of having guardrails, but also not constraining people too much, especially when you are a business that is still scaling, still growing. So let's talk about scaling. And I think that everyone that has experienced life in a startup would probably agree that there is something magical about creating a successful business from scratch. Because when you are still small and it's early on, people are in sync, the energy is really electric and everyone's pulling in the same direction. But once growth accelerates, it's often doesn't look that great anymore. So like it did in Spotify very early on, I guess that probably the magic ingredient that made you successful in the first place might have gotten diluted on the way and started losing its power. So I want to ask you, because you've been with Spotify since 2013, and back then, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Spotify had around 600 employees. Today, you are over 6,000 people, so exponential growth. How do you make sure that you keep magic alive?
I think it's a lot of different things, but not necessarily all that tricky. If you can just make sure that you can have a couple of your eye on the prize, but also go back to what we kind of know, if we know what we are doing. One being where are the thresholds for an organization? When do they switch? And there is something that happens with a company when you go from being 75 to 76 people, or when you go from being close to 350 and you turn 350 or 700 or 1200. There are a couple of steps where a lot of things changes, and if you just being mindful and know that what took you there will not take you to the next kind of level. That is one thing to keep in mind. The second thing is, if you look at this relationship more or less as a marriage or that type of private relationship too, what happens is that everybody is, as you said, coming in where you know each other. It's a honeymoon phase. Everybody wants to show their best side. It's very clear what you're going to do and how you're going to live that life. And what happens then when it gets a bit more into scale, a lot of people that were really good at what they were doing and enjoyed exactly what they were doing shouldn't be scared to have very honest discussions where they start to go like, I want to cling on to what startup is when it's time to go in and shift the load from the left leg to the right leg and be a scale up. And this is also where you can have an insanely good business idea, right? But if you can't execute on what it means to change the org design, add a different type of maybe 10 poles into your hiring kind of mix up, making sure that you have the right talent with the right talent skills, having a mix of people that are good at startup, but also people that has some experience for a bit more mature company, staying true to your values and growing and changing the things that needs to be changed. It's a lot of things to keep in mind. And I think we all know that there has been a lot of companies that had really, really good business ideas, but they didn't survive. And it wasn't because the business idea was not good. They just didn't survive the growing pains, right? And this is where HR, or if you call your organization people, are more important than most organizations give them credit for. This is also where we play a very, very important part, and you can still do that behind the curtains. But if you can't accelerate, if you can't do that growth, and if you can't make sure that everything that you know, everything that you have as an experience, and if you apply that to that specific company in that specific time, and in those small paradigm shifts, this is where the best of ideas and the best of people and companies don't necessarily live to see another day. So I think those things together, and then the other thing, obviously, if you're in hypergrowth year in and year out, that could kill any organization, because it's not just about the talent acquisition or the people HR side. It's also about hiring managers. It's about all the peers that needs to be buddies and onboard other new colleagues all the time. And it's also about maybe cracking the code more so to onboarding in a smart, very efficient way than actually cracking the code of recruiting or screening or hiring people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So this would be my next question. If you had to prioritize like three things, and especially I think what's interesting, and in 2013, it was around 600, 500 people. At that stage of growth, when you know that you are still growing and you will be growing exponentially, what are the priorities for an organization of that size? And things that absolutely need to be in place in order to be able to continue growing without a crash?
I think the most important thing in this company, but also I've been on other kind of startup journeys, is this: you have to dare to challenge chosen truth. And what do I mean by that? It is, you have to kill some darlings. If you've been very successful, and I think we were actually close to 800 when I joined late 2013. If you have been very, very successful and you feel that you are on a very, very good path to be able to do exactly what you would like to do, and you might even think that this is, hey, we're killing it. I think you have to stay humble. You have to be curious. You have to dare to try new things. But I think the most important thing is you have to kill darlings, because it's one skill set, it's one setup to run an 800 people company. But if you settle for good enough, or this is really acing it now, and you know that you need to be 3,500 people pretty soon, or even in a couple of years 7,000 people or 10,000 people, it will never work. Which means that you have to really challenge those truths, meaning you have to take a couple of big fights, and that happens to us too. And you're not going to win a popularity contest. You're not going to be very much liked if you also call out that what was a winning bet might very soon be a losing bet. But this, and not just leave it there, of course, but also then say, this is the way that we're going to go forward. And a lot of people will not believe in that. A lot of people don't want to see that. And a lot of people don't want change, because most people also are change averse.
Yeah, absolutely. By nature. Yeah. So there are so many challenges there. And one of them is, first of all, in order for people to have these conversations about killing our darlings, you need to have psychological safety and also openness, as you say. So people need to be open to ideas changing direction, and first of all, never believing what they are thinking in their own heads. So again, question a little bit more tactical, I guess. How do you ensure in Spotify that this environment of psychological safety, of openness, of keeping your ego in check and not believing everything that you think, how do you ensure that this environment exists?
Well, I'm not naive, and I know for a fact that we've been more successful sometimes and less successful sometimes, and it's not switching from day to day. But obviously, there are different locations, different teams, different units that are better or not so good at really providing that safe space, right? To say that we really cracked the code of that and it's 100% safe, I think that would be really actually close to stupid of me to say. But one of the things that have helped us is obviously a lot of things do actually start at the top by having a CEO and founder that is very open and very good at active listening, to believe in that we should try things. And when you try a lot of things, you will open yourself up for failure. And if you also, it's accepted that you learn from those failures, you close to also even maybe sometimes celebrate them or have Swedish fika where we digest into, okay, so what is the retro here? What can we learn? What is the postmortem? And then we learn from them. Then it's easier and easier for everybody else, obviously, to also fail and try things and see that nothing really happened if I'm just open to learn from these mistakes, right? So I think these things. The other thing is, I think you have to define what you have to define what that safety actually means. And it can mean so many different things, and we tend to be a bit selective. But if it means that you can, a good idea is a good idea, whoever comes with it. And as I said, if we try something and it doesn't necessarily end up in 100% success, it's all good. And if we also can do things like failing faster and also learning faster than the world is changing, then it's super good, right? So I think it's all about understanding that if you depend on maybe the top management to come up with good ideas, maybe that you will have 7 good ideas. If you rather think that everybody that is joining your company could come up with a good idea, then all of a sudden you have 7,000 good ideas. And obviously, again, not all of them will be 100 smashing success. So if you talk about it, you're making sure you are transparent and open. You even discuss them on, your unplugs and all hands and town halls. And especially if you share from the executive team things that you had as beliefs and things that we made a big bet and invested a lot of time that didn't turn out the way that we wanted it. And it looks like it's also super safe. And he or she or they are still there the next day after doing that. Then hopefully that will also trickle down to the whole organization. So there's so many different things that you can do to really make sure that you create that safe environment, but you also keep it. But it's hard, and it's something that you have to work on, and it's kind of one of those hit and remind all the time, and be very conscious about it.
Right, and it's a never-ending process, right? So you never arrive. You can never say, "Oh, now we have a safe environment and everyone is open, and so we're good." It's really something that you can never stop doing, and I particularly like that point about actually demonstrating what it looks like when someone is open and when someone changes their beliefs, because I think that culture is really formed through shared experiences. So the more of these experiences you can create where you don't just talk about those things, but people can witness something that happened. And as you say, this person still being there, so not being fired because their idea didn't work. It's really powerful. And I think those are the things that leave an imprint on culture and really speak so much louder than any words could. So thanks for giving this example. I think it's really a really important point. Okay, so I think it's a good time for us to move to the questions that we received from our listeners. Time for your questions.
Hi, Aga. This is Alison McTavish from Switzerland.
Hi, this is Dale Hintz. I'm submitting a question to the Culture Lab.
Hi, Aga. I just want to say thank you so much for doing the podcast.
I have a question for Culture Lab.
Hello, my name is Morten Abbey from Denmark.
Hi, Ed. This is Tim Coupler.
Hi, I'm Kostas. I have a question for you, Michael.
I'd love to hear your answer. Thank you.
Thanks for entertaining my question.
So this time we have a series of questions from Sofia Nunez, one of the founding members of our newly formed community for culture leaders that is called CultureBrained, and more importantly, the co-founder and head of culture at Mambo, which is a cloud platform for digital banking and one of the most impressive European unicorns. So here's Sofia.
Hi, Katarina. I have a few questions for you. Since you joined Spotify in 2013, the company went from about 900 employees to almost 6,000. If you had 2 words to describe the culture in 2013 and now, what would they be?
Good question, Sophia. I would then maybe be a bit harsh and say that 2013, it was a bit boys clubby. And today, I would say that it is a collaborative, leaning in type B organization.
Okay, great. So let's hear Sophia's second question.
How does Spotify ensure that employees continue feeling a sense of belonging while fully embracing the hybrid model and having people choosing where they would like to work from?
I think that is another excellent question, because belonging, if in the sense of diversity, inclusion, and belonging is one question, and belonging in the sense of community is another question. But this is one of the things that we have on our radar, and we want to be humble and say we don't have all the answers just because we launched a program where we turned more or less every stone that we could think about. But we didn't want to wait either to do this, because what we have heard from our people and what makes sense for our organization is that the curse of the pandemic is obvious, but the blessing is that everybody also got a taste of flexibility and freedom, right? And the notion that for us at least, the work is not a place that you come into. It's actually something that you do. So how do we then decide and how do we strengthen the community and the culture? In the beginning of this podcast, I spoke a bit about, my definition about culture. And then when you start to think about it in that sense, again, if it is the heart and soul and the energy of a shared human experience, it doesn't necessarily need a place, a physical place, the way that we've been thinking about it. And this is where it's hard sometimes, including for myself and people at Spotify too, obviously, is that what we have learned and been accustomed to for the longest time, and for every big paradigm shift that we live, the industrial era, going into the more informational and now the distributed era. This is where we have to pressure test things that we have gotten to know to. And I think one part of the question is this: will it be much harder now with community just because we don't come into a workplace? The way that we have flipped the question at Spotify is this: we actually became distributed company as soon as we needed more than one floor in an office. And for sure today, when we have more than 70 offices around the world and we have people in every time zone, nobody really said it was hard to keep one culture back then, even if it wasn't, it was still a big feat, right? But we need to work on this. And where I started, we need to be humble. We don't have all the answers, and we have sure not cracked the code. So this is what we need to be, a very close dialogue with our people. And we need to tweak and iterate so we don't lose that loving feeling and what we call the code green, and what makes Spotify and special and unique for our people. So we're going to learn, we're going to tweak, we're going to maybe go back on a couple of things and push forward on other things. But this is something that is on the dashboard of the things that we want to monitor very closely going forward with our Spotify Work from Anywhere program.
Yeah. I know that people who listen to the podcast love some specific examples of what other companies are doing. So could you share, if of course you can share, some of the practices that you have already implemented to facilitate and foster that sense of belonging in this environment, something that you are currently experimenting with?
So there's a lot of things that we did, and I think we are not unique compared with other companies, because this pandemic forced all of us to turn into a lot of digital offerings, right? And also on the side, what we call people experience and community experience. So those breaks, those connective tissue, the social glue kind of activities, and that doesn't really have to do with work, and the things that remind us that we have sort of a mental kind of club blazer on that makes us Spotifyers, instead of something or part of another organization or company that is as good or for other people better even. And these are things that we kind of nudge the organization with different nuggets. We do a lot of things that we think is fun. and not necessarily always serious things that. But I think that is the activities. Then we, in everything that we do, that Greenhouse, which is our learning and development department, it's kind of is embedded in everything that they do. So we reinforce and enhance things that are very specific for us. It is, the internal comms and all the HR work that we do, again, gives us a chance to remind people. But what we also did, that we invested a bit more and took some time to design, was something that we call the band reunion, which was, okay, nobody knows when the pandemic was over. And everybody wants to go back to some sort of normal. And we would love to be able to choose ourselves where to see and when to see and how often to see each other, no matter if you choose a home mix or an office mix in our Spotify Work From Anywhere program. But since there is a virus out there and we want to be safe, and safety of our people is most important to us, how can we do a brand reunion in a smart way, designed in a way where we can talk about purpose and our mission and our values and why we signed? So we kind of repropose to ourselves and also repurpose why we actually once at a time apply to this company, what we are here to do. As individuals, but also as team, but also the whole kind of community at Spotify. So there are a lot of things that you can do in small and big, well thought through and more spontaneous. And I think you just have to be open to all of these. But if I would mention one thing, I think it's the band reunion. And it's also been very well received, and people got a lot of energy and think it's very meaningful to take the time out from work to actually have these conversations in a structured way.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, I've been doing this with companies, something similar, engaging people in conversations. I have a process that is called the fireside chat. Mm-hmm. And it's all about basically exchanging stories about what happened. So, it can be war stories or even our origin story. People love hearing that, especially from the founder, obviously, and transformation stories, and then extracting meaning from it. So then there are facilitated conversations about what values are coming up and what's the purpose and so on and so forth. And people love it. And exactly. It's so, so important. So yeah, leveraging stories. I absolutely agree. It's, and it's funny because actually we often think about how can we do things differently? How can we come up with something new? But I believe that there is huge power in going back to our roots and really thinking where human beings are coming from. And when you think about this, we would just gather around a fire and talk about what happened and make sense out of it. And that was the thing that connected people. And that was also the thing that enabled us to create culture. So sometimes just, going back to the old rather than thinking, how can we do it differently in a new way? It makes total sense. And I think especially in the digital era, people are hungry for those things.
Yeah, I think it's. I think you're 100% right. I think it's the vehicles can be new, but I think we already have this knowledge, and sometimes we overcomplicate and over-engineer things, and because we are very smart creatures, all of us. But I think if we go back to try to simplify things and go back to what we actually know, and go back to listen to your heart rather than always to your brain, I think you will come. You can go from insights to impact in a very, very smart way.
This is great. So I have one last question for you from Sophia. Let's hear it.
In the early days, what criteria did you use to prioritize your team's areas of action in the company?
Thank you, Sophia. If I understand the question correctly, it is about how my specific team do this. And I have 3 teams. I oversee the HR team or the people team. I oversee the strategy operation for the whole company, and also the GVS, which is the Global Workplace Services. And I would say the backbone of everything that we do, and not just in my teams, but at Spotify, is that we use the DIPS model, meaning it's the data that more or less everybody can get their hands on what's happening out in the world. It's the insights. Again, it could be internal as well as external. Usually, hopefully, it's a mix of those. and then you create a couple of beliefs, right? And then you on that you decide on a couple of bets, and those bets should also be contrarian. Sometimes you have to dare to draw and decide on a couple of contrarian bets. And I think that is the framework of how we decide what to do and not to do, because when everything is important, nothing is important. So you have to be able to prioritize. And when you take the easy way out, or the route of, okay, so this is the data we have, this is the insights, this is the beliefs, I think you will come to the same conclusion as everybody that is actually looking at that. But it's all about perspective, right? So when you put that light into the prisma, it will actually have different colors depending on what side you look at it. And I think that is the important thing. And you try and you tweak, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And one thing that everybody can remind themselves of, it's not just the R&D, it's not just the tech and product people that can do A/B testing. We need to allow ourselves to do that too. It doesn't have to be perfect when it comes out. And you learn and you listen and you tweak and you correct, you course correct.
Totally. And that's exactly why we call this podcast the Culture Lab, because I'm a big fan of experimenting, especially in the area of people. And I think I agree with you. I don't know where it's coming from, but especially in the area of HR, there has always been this need for being perfect and huge rollouts and just huge campaigns. And I think now we know that it really doesn't work. So yeah, I'm all for experimenting. So final section of the show is rapid fire questions. And I have 5 questions for you. I'm going to ask them in rapid succession. And the challenge is that you are going to try to answer all these questions in under 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So let's go. So when I offer you the term a culture-brained leader, what comes to mind?
Daniel Ek.
Can you elaborate just a tiny bit?
No, I think he personates. I think he embodies exactly that, or at least what I put into that when you say it like that.
Yeah. And what is the sign, or perhaps signs in plural, that a company culture needs some work, or perhaps even a major overhaul?
I think when obviously when the culture is dysfunctional, when it doesn't support, the vision, when people are not necessarily happy or can be their best selves, and where they can't do good job, have fun and grow at the same time. This is where you have to take a long and hard look at what's actually popping in your culture, and on the opposite. But then again, this is one of those journeys that you never done, you never exceed, and it's a constant work.
Yeah. What company do you admire for the culture, and why?
I think I admire Disney for their culture. Never worked at Disney, but it feels like everybody, whoever you talk to, no matter if they're swiping the street on the main street at Disney World, they do understand that they are there as a part of the entertainment, but for sure the magic. And when everything is like a red thread right there, right through the company, and everything that you do, and you can see all the things that they say and feel it, both as, I hope, an employee as well as a customer. I think you're pretty close to acing it.
Yeah. What books on culture or on leadership would you recommend to our listeners?
Very few. I think you have to have your own philosophy. I think it's great to be inspired. I think most of the cool ideas comes in dialogue and conversations. I think most of the time when you read, it's quite dead material and it's very theoretical. Doesn't really necessarily apply to your organization. You have to be bold. You have to try. You have to have your own philosophy of how you're going to play the game and how you're going to play the game. Obviously, there are a couple of books that are still, I think, very much still holding their own place. I think From Good to Great is one of those that are still, worth reading. And there is a Swedish book in Swedish is called Riv pyramiderna, I guess, tear the pyramid down. I think those are the two books that I keep coming back to. And podcasts. There's so many things that you can listen to out there. But I would go and listen to more of founders or CEO stories and then pick out the nuggets there rather than maybe the ones that are focusing on culture alone or leadership alone, because they have a tendency to be quite scripted. And it's the same thing that is said over and over again.
Yeah. And what is one thing that our listeners can do tomorrow to build their own culture lab and start cultivating a culture that will help them and their teams to bring their vision to life?
I think the most important thing is to start doing. So do is the most important thing to do.
So if our listeners want to learn more about you, about how Spotify cultivates the right culture, what are the best places to go?
We do have a Spotify HR blog. It's been around for a long time because we couldn't take all the calls or do all the panels or all the keynotes or, having companies tour the Spotify. So go to Spotify HR blog. We try to be transparent about everything that we do, both the things that are good or the things that didn't really turn out the way that we planned them to. There is a VOD/pod that is called HR The Real Deal or HR Across the Counter. A lot of our experience and what we do and how we think, our philosophy and our strategies are discussed in that pod. So if you're a person that want to see it, then it's a VOD on YouTube. If it's a pod, then you go to Spotify and listen to HR Across the Counter. And then on LinkedIn, I don't know if I'm semi-active or if I'm quite active. I don't know.
You are active.
Yeah. So I think that is another place where you could follow.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Katarina, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom here on the podcast with us. I really appreciate your work. I appreciate what you do. I love Spotify, definitely my favorite music streaming platform. So thank you. And I hope that you will keep doing great. I know that you've made a lot of acquisitions in the podcasting industry as well. So really looking forward to new developments around that as well.
Thank you very much. And it was my pleasure.
I'm Aga Bayer, the creator and host of the Culture Lab podcast, and this is the Culture Lab team.
Production Manager, Lindsay Nunez.
Ebony Watson, Art Director.
Amanda Taylor, Content Editor.
Sound Producer, James Eade, Be Heard.
This was Katarina Berg. And thank you for joining us for this episode of the Culture Lab podcast. Katarina and I hope that you will take these ideas, the ones that resonated, and experiment with them in your own company. And before I give you a quick preview of the next episode, let me just remind you that this episode is brought to you by CultureBrained, which is a one-of-its-kind virtual community for culture leaders who look for new ways of cultivating remarkable cultures in this brave new world of remote and hybrid work. So if you care about your company's success and if you resonate with our vision and our values, you might consider joining as a founding member. Check it out at CultureBrained.com. There's a link in the show notes. And now, a quick preview of the upcoming episode. My next guest is Yvette Pasqua, the CTO of Exos, where she leads the product and engineering teams with focus on continuous improvement, iteration, and using data to launch software that helps their members become healthier and achieve their wellness and professional goals. And in this short preview, Yvette talks about something that has been an integral part of culture-related discourse, especially after the outbreak of the pandemic, the importance of focusing on outcomes rather than outputs. And this is super important if you want to motivate smart, capable team members who thrive on autonomy and flexibility. Here is Yvette.
I work in a culture best when someone can set goals with me and for me, clear, measurable results, like outcome driven, that have a real impact on our customers and our business. And then they kind of, set me off to run as fast and well toward that goal. And I believe strongly that that's the culture of high performing teams, especially in the tech space, where you have to out innovate people. And innovation is a combination of speed, but pointing in the right direction. So you're pointing in the right direction when you share common outcome-driven goals that reflect what your customers value and what your business needs.
Thanks for tuning in and listening to this episode of the Culture Lab podcast. If you found any moments that were interesting, inspiring, or maybe even game-changing, please share this episode with someone who'd appreciate it. After all, good ideas are meant to be shared. If you haven't subscribed to the Culture Lab yet, you can do it on any podcast streaming platform of your choice. If you want to receive our weekly insights on cultivating a remarkable, powerful, and authentic company culture, especially in a business that scales, type this into your browser: tinyurl.com/agabayer. That's tinyurl.com/AGABAJER. Also, we would be ever so grateful if you could rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to it. And finally, the entire Culture Lab team and our guests, we are going to continue exploring how we can make the word work synonymous with fun, meaning, and belonging, and how we can build remarkable cultures that scale as our businesses grow and the world keeps on changing. So, what do you want to hear about next? What matters to you? Email us at lindsay@agabayer.com and let us know.